And David Davis and David Cameron are the two members of Parliament trying to take his place. The two debated in a BBC program called Question Time, hosted by David Dimbley. They took questions from a studio audience during this one-hour program.
Question from Robert Murray, please.
I've heard both candidates say that they would like to retrieve some of the powers that the EU has taken away from the UK. If either of you become Prime Minister, which specific powers would you want to retrieve first?
And I guess where do you differ from each other is crucial in this. David Davis, you start on this one.
What I've argued already is that we should have an open Europe. So not just Britain, but any country should be able to take back powers. And the only powers that will be limited from that, prevented from being recovered, will be a narrow group of powers relating to the single market. Because after all, back in 1975, we signed up to join the common market, not to join the United States of Europe. And so that... And so what I propose is almost any power should be capable of being brought back. Many of them should be. Some of the environmental powers, some of the social chapter, well, all of the social chapter, fishing, agriculture. There are a whole series of areas we can bring back powers. But what I want is that to be an option to any country in Europe. And if we do that, we may have a decent chance of getting such a proposal through and actually making Europe work better for everybody.
How does your policy differ from David Davis?
I think that we should have a very clear strategic imperative, which is that we need to bring back the powers over social policy and employment policy that are causing so much damage to British business. I think the Conservative Party should make the argument about Europe one into economic competitiveness. We're in the European Union because we want to trade and cooperate with our neighbours. We don't, as David said, want to be part of a country called Europe. We don't want a superstate. We don't want a federal state. We want an open and flexible Europe. But I'm realistic. In a negotiation, what you want to have is a clear idea of what you want to retrieve. And those powers over employment and social legislation that are doing so much damage to our businesses that need to compete not just with France and with Germany, but with China and India, who are producing 4 million graduates a year.
David,
so that, I think, should be our central concern. And then, with single-minded power, we can actually get those powers back.
Is that your policy?
No, more than that. I mean, I can understand David's argument, and of course it's a very important argument that we're going to face competition from China and India and so on, so we've got to actually get our affairs in order. But what about issues like asylum and immigration, where there's a common European asylum policy proposed? Remember, when we put up our asylum and immigration policy before the election, we were told by a European Commissioner that we couldn't do it. It was against the rules. Now that's actually stopping us controlling our own destiny, something vital to the security and integrity of our country. Now surely you believe that should be recovered
where it is the case that we cannot deliver what we need for the own good of our country, then yes, that argument has to be made.
Then we
but
agree.
where I think David wants to go further is this idea he announced this week of some double referendum. I think this party has got to spend some time thinking through its policies. I don't want to see us announcing policies day after day to meet a newspaper headline, to meet a deadline. I want us to think things through. One of the problems...
Are you saying David Davis has not thought through his
One of the problems... I'm just making... I'll answer this.
You're saying that he is seeking headlines with day-to-day announcements?
I will make my point in my own way. One of the issues this party has to confront is... One of the problems we've had at previous elections is a problem of credibility. People want to know we are an effective opposition, we're ready to be a government, and that we've thought through our policies. And that's why I think it's absolutely vital to do that in proper order.
All right, well, what do you say to this comment on that?
I say this to David. I've actually been there. I was Minister for Europe. My nickname was Monsieur Non, for reasons you can work out. And I watched how the European Union, particularly the elites of Europe, handled individual governments. They viewed them, frankly, very often as unimportant because they saw them as temporary. Regrettably, in 1997, we were temporary. But the simple truth is that they viewed us as temporary. But look what happens when a referendum goes against the European Union. We've had just two referenda out of a potential 20-odd, on the Constitution, and the Constitution, a massive project, was derailed. And the purpose of this is not on the back of an envelope or something. It's actually, I've thought about for many years, for a decade, is to put pressure on the European Union so that we actually get back the powers that are deservedly ours.
Okay, I want to bring in members of the audience who want to speak. You, sir, first of all.
Yeah, the European Union hasn't exactly played by fair game. It has, nullified referendums it doesn't agree the result with. So surely, if you want to take powers back, you have to say, we want these powers back or we will pull out. There has to be, you have to draw the line in the sand and say, we will take these powers back or we will leave.
David Davis?
No, it's unnecessary. The simple truth is, under David's model, under the model we proposed at the last election, and under my model, if the European Union doesn't agree, then there'll be a crisis. Now, what comes out of that crisis, it will be unwise to talk about beforehand, but it will be a crisis, and that's one of the things that drives the union. But what I'm saying is, we can actually shape the odds in our favour, shape the negotiating odds in our favour, by using an open Europe which attracts a lot of other countries, and then using the referendum to put pressure on the European negotiators.
Also, where I agree with David about that is if actually we say to the other countries of Europe, if you want to go ahead and do things together that we want to do, fine, go ahead and do them, but there are some things we'd like to do ourselves. That is a negotiation, and that's a negotiation I believe that we can win.
Okay.
David Cameron, you said that you talked about business and Europe being overloaded with business problems from laws from Brussels. If we do do what you say, will you be able to repeal many of those laws that will then help business to prosper, because they're not at the moment, but many of the laws that we've brought in are on the back of Europe and we've gold-plated them, so can we have the assurance that you'd be able to take them back?
That's absolutely right. If we get out of the social and employment legislation that's doing so much damage, we stop damage for the future, but we can also then look again at the rules that have been imposed on British business, because so often we get in Whitehall a gold plating of something that's been agreed in Brussels that does further damage. And we've got to both reduce the future flow of regulation and reduce the stock of regulation that business faces in this country. Okay. It's the biggest challenge for us, because we face such competition overseas.
Mr. Blair cheated us out of the referendum, I feel. So I look forward to Mr. Davis being possible future Prime Minister and giving us a say about Europe, giving all of us a say.
Would you give a referendum?
My concern about the referendum plan is I want to fight an election really clearly on taking back those key powers to make sure this country is competitive. Having done that, I don't want then to spend a lot of time on a referendum asking for permission to do that, because we would have just had a mandate from the British people to do precisely that.